then I had everything. Then I had nothing again. And it was okay going from nothing to everything to nothing, but then having someone stand on the back of my head and keep me underwater.
For a long time, Dave Mustaine lived the kind of life most musicians only dream about. Big crowds, loud guitars, and a legacy that helped shape heavy metal itself. But now, at 63, things are different. Life isn't like it used to be. After decades of pouring everything into music, the toll is starting to show. Can a life filled with so much still be lived the same way? Join us as we dive into the story of Dave Mustaine and the unexpected twists that have turned his life in ways nobody saw coming. The weight of time. Dave Mustaine always seemed like one of those guys who could take anything life threw at him. The red-haired metal legend, the frontman of Megadeth, the guy who could shred a guitar like his fingers were on fire. He spent decades owning the stage. He screamed, he sang, he head-banged with every ounce of his being. And for the longest time, it seemed like he would never stop. Like many rock stars, he looked invincible from a distance. But now, at 63, life has begun to show its weight. There's a quiet shift that happens when someone who once lived with so much energy begins to slow down. And with Mustaine, that change is not just visible, it's emotional. The man who once delivered power-packed performances night after night now moves more carefully. His voice, once razor-sharp, doesn't quite have the same edge. The spirit is still there, but the body? It's tired. You'll want to keep watching this video, especially if you grew up listening to his music, because this has been tough. Let's be real. Nobody stays the same forever. But with Dave, it's not just about getting older. His journey has been filled with some truly brutal battles, and one of the most painful chapters started in 2019. That was the year he revealed that he had been diagnosed with throat cancer, leaving his fans speechless. Think about that for a second. The very thing that gave him his identity, his voice, was under attack. Mustaine had spent a lifetime screaming out lyrics, pushing his vocal cords to the limit. And suddenly, his voice was in danger of being silenced for good. It wasn't just any diagnosis either. Throat cancer is a scary one. It often comes with intense treatments like radiation and chemotherapy. It changes the way a person eats, speaks, even breathes. Dave didn't crumble. That's not who he is. But he did have to face some serious moments of doubt. He had to cancel shows, pull back from the spotlight, and face long, grueling days of treatment. For someone who'd always been in control on stage, suddenly having his body dictate what he could or couldn't do was a shock. At the time, you could almost hear the pain in his voice when he talked about it. But throat cancer wasn't the only health hurdle he's had to deal with. For years, Dave Mustaine has also been quietly suffering from cervical stenosis, another painful condition. It's a spine issue, but that simple description doesn't do it justice. Cervical stenosis means the spaces within his spine have narrowed, putting serious pressure on his nerves. And the pain? It can be unbearable. Numbness in the arms and legs, weakness, chronic discomfort. These are just some of the symptoms. And what caused it? Years of headbanging. Sounds dramatic, but it's true. Imagine swinging your head violently back and forth, night after night, for decades. That kind of movement puts a ton of stress on the neck and spine. Dave wasn't doing it once in a while. He was doing it for hours during concerts, on tours that ran for months. He lived for the stage. But that passion came at a price. His neck took a beating, and now, in his 60s, he's paying for it. He's spoken about how the condition has affected him, not just physically, but emotionally too. When your body stops working the way it used to, especially when it's something you did to yourself out of love for your art, the regret can be heavy. Dave once said he used to ignore the signs. The stiffness and the pain didn't matter when the crowd was roaring. But now, those old decisions won't stop haunting him. And remember, this is a guy whose entire identity was built on being tough, fast, and loud. To see him slow down, to see him wincing from pain or struggling to get through a show, it's heartbreaking. But there's something else too. When you've built your life on intensity, whether it's from screaming into a mic or thrashing on a guitar, pulling back doesn't feel natural. It feels wrong. It feels like a loss. And for Dave Mustaine, that sense of loss is clear in every recent interview, every quiet moment on stage. He doesn't need to say it. You can just feel it. Between the cancer, the spinal issues, and the natural weight of aging, he's had to wrestle time, the one enemy no one ever beats. The fire's still in him, but the fuel is running low. And that's why his story feels so personal now, because it's no longer just about the music. It's about what happens when the world slows down and you're left with the memories, the scars, and the question of what comes next. And for Dave Mustaine, that question still hangs in the air. Keep watching. There's more. When the stage lights dimmed off stage. Looking back, Dave Mustaine's time with Metallica is one of the most infamous and emotionally charged chapters in rock history. In 1981, before Megadeth even existed, Dave was a rising young guitarist with raw talent and a fiery attitude. Metallica had just formed and was still figuring out its sound, and they saw something in Mustaine that they wanted. He had the look, the aggression, and the kind of guitar skills that could match the band's intensity. So they brought him in as their lead guitarist. For a while, it worked. Dave helped shape Metallica's early sound. He contributed riffs, lyrics, and the kind of ferocious energy that pushed the band forward. Some of the songs from Metallica's debut album still carry his writing credits, even though by the time that album came out, he was no longer in the band. So what went wrong? It was a mix of personality clashes, drinking, and violence. Dave had a reputation for partying, and sometimes too hard. The band as a whole was known for drinking. In fact, they earned the nickname Alcoholica due to the members' heavy drinking habits, but Mustaine's behavior became unpredictable when he was drunk. He'd get aggressive, pick fights, and push people away. Tensions grew fast, especially with drummer Lars Ulrich and frontman James Hetfield. One morning in April 1983, while Metallica was in New York preparing to record their first album, the band decided they'd had enough. Without any warning, they woke Dave up around 9 a.m., handed him a bus ticket back to California, and told him he was out of the band. No second chances, no discussion. 1 minute you're in one of the most promising metal bands in the world. The next, you're being kicked out, watching your dream vanish from a Greyhound window. In an interview 20 years later, Dave mentioned that he hadn't gotten over the incident. It wasn't just about losing a job, it was about being tossed aside by people he saw as brothers. That moment scarred him deeply, but it also lit a fire in him. It was out of that bitterness, rejection, and pain he created Megadeth, a band that would go on to rival Metallica in speed, aggression, and legacy. Still, that early wound stayed with him for years. Even after success, even after stadium tours, as Mustaine admitted, he never fully got over it. Besides, not many people realize just how close Megadeth came to disappearing forever. Back in 2002, Dave Mustaine's world changed almost overnight. While most fans were still riding the high of the band's music, something terrifying happened behind the scenes. During a brief moment that might have seemed like nothing at first, Dave suffered a serious arm injury. But it wasn't just a small sprain or a temporary setback. No, this was something far worse. He had sustained nerve damage to his left arm, an injury that left him unable to even play the guitar. Imagine that. One of metal's greatest guitarists suddenly couldn't use the very arm that brought his music to life. And for Dave, who built his identity around his music, that was devastating. The man who had fought his way back after being kicked out of Metallica, who had carved out his own legacy through sheer will and aggression, was now forced into silence. The pain was physical, yes, but the emotional toll was just as deep. Without his guitar, without the rush of playing, Mustaine felt stripped of his purpose. He didn't sugarcoat things at the time. He knew Megadeth couldn't go on like that. And so, in 2002, the band that had once set arenas on fire was temporarily disbanded. It was a painful decision, but for Mustaine, there was no choice. He needed time to heal. No tours, no recordings. Just the painful, uncertain wait to see if he'd ever be able to play again. By the time 2004 rolled around, he was ready to try again. His arm had improved, enough at least to start playing once more. But reuniting Megadeth wasn't simple. The comeback was possible, yes. But the wounds left behind hadn't all healed, and that included the band's internal relationships. That same year, David Ellefson, longtime bassist and a foundational member of Megadeth, filed a lawsuit against Mustaine. Fans who had followed the band since its early days couldn't believe it. These two had been side by side through thick and thin. But things had gone sour. The lawsuit, in essence, was about money, specifically royalties and the business deals tied to the band's earlier years. For Dave, the betrayal stung. It wasn't just about legal documents or finances. This was someone he had called a brother, someone who had helped shape the band's sound from the beginning. And now, they were fighting in courtrooms instead of jamming in studios. This wouldn't be the only legal headache Dave would face. Fast forward almost 2 decades later to 2023. Just when fans thought the storms had passed, another unexpected battle landed on his doorstep. Corey Brennan, the man who had been managing both Mustaine and Megadeth through his company, 5B Artist Management, filed a lawsuit of his own. According to Brennan, Dave had suddenly cut him off, terminating their professional relationship without warning. Brennan claimed he was owed commissions for his work and accused Mustaine of breaching their contract. Once again, Mustaine found himself pulled into another legal fight, not because of his music, but because of business fallout. These weren't just names on a piece of paper. These were people he had worked with, trusted, and brought into his world. And yet, it always seemed to end in conflict. For someone like Dave, who had poured his entire life into music, these moments didn't just affect the band's public image. They wore him down. Fans often see the tough, fiery persona on stage. But away from the lights, these conflicts left lasting bruises. When people talk about his sadness now at 63, they aren't just talking about age or illness. They're talking about a man who has carried years of emotional weight on top of physical pain. How Dave Mustaine fought back. After everything he had faced, most people would have expected Dave Mustaine to slow down, maybe even fade quietly from the spotlight. But that's not what happened. The same stubborn fire that had driven him through decades of music didn't go out when life got hard. If anything, it burned even brighter. Take his battle with throat cancer, for instance. It came straight from him. But somehow, he pushed through it. He surrounded himself with family and close friends and leaned hard on his faith. By October that same year, doctors told him he was cancer-free. Fans around the world breathed a sigh of relief. But it wasn't just the fact that he beat cancer. It was how fast he turned around and got back on stage that blew everyone's mind. In January 2020, just months after finishing his treatment, Dave was back doing what he loved. On stage, guitar in hand, with thousands cheering him on. It wasn't a quiet return. It was powerful, bold, and full of the same energy he'd always had. Of course, the neck and spine problems didn't just disappear. Years of headbanging had left their mark, but Mustaine found ways to adapt. He started taking better care of his body. He worked with physical therapists, took up healthier habits, and learned how to manage the pain. He couldn't thrash around like he did in the 80s, but he could still deliver a performance that kept the crowd on fire. What's more surprising is how sharp and focused he remains today. Even at 63, he's still writing music, still touring, still showing up. He's active on social media, engaging with fans, and even mentoring younger musicians. His 2022 album, The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, proved that he hadn't lost his touch. The riffs were still tight, the lyrics still cut deep, and the energy still burned through every track. Beyond the stage, Mustaine has also found a kind of peace in his personal life. He spends more time with his family now. He's talked openly about how becoming a grandfather changed him. There's a softness there now, a side of him people didn't always see in the early years. The anger is still there when he needs it for a song, but it's balanced by something more grounded. Dave Mustaine hasn't just survived, he's evolved. His body may have taken a beating, but his spirit never backed down. And somehow, after all these years, he's still standing, still singing, still shredding, and still making people feel something real when they hear his music. He's still doing what he's always done best. It's not lost on him how fragile everything is, how quickly it all could have ended. The pain, the setbacks, the nights he probably thought he'd never perform again. They've all added weight to every note he plays now. There's a humility in him that wasn't always there before, a quiet sense of gratitude that cuts through his usual fire. As he once said, "It's a wonder, based on everything that happened, the guy upstairs is even letting me continue to do what I love." What do you think about Dave Mustaine's journey? Do you think he's handling everything life's thrown at him in the best way possible? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.